Maybe I could just say that customer success is the key to growth and like do a mic drop and walk off and just say Salesforce and Okta. In all seriousness, thank you for the introduction. My role at Okta is our Chief Customer Officer, and what that means is I'm responsible for everything post-sale. So once we actually sell our solutions to a customer, making that real with professional services and education, and then moving on through the life cycle as customers interact with our support organization, our CSM team, and then ultimately securing the renewal. The way we think about our customers at Okta, sorry, but we're not just single sign-on. We are the leading provider of enterprise identity and access management. And the easiest way to think of that is in two separate use cases. So we provide secure access for employees, so those of you in the room who all work for different companies, to access the technologies that you need to do your jobs every day. So make it easy for you to come in, sit down, and get access to everything either on-prem or in the cloud that you need to be successful. And then we do the same thing for your customers, your partners, your vendors, and we call that customer identity access management, where we are helping you secure your experiences with your customers and allowing them to do business online with you, or allowing your partners to interact with the supply chain. Things like that. So large companies like Albertsons, JetBlue, they use us for that customer identity access management. And then organizations like Splunk, Hitachi, McKesson use us for that workforce piece of it. Like you mentioned, I've been in customer success. I've worked at high-growth SaaS companies my whole career. So I'm really passionate about this topic. I can say that I truly, in my career, I truly grew up doing this. I learned the trade from the ground up. And it's something I like talking about. And my favorite thing to talk about is not so much the how, because I think we can all talk about our practice and what it is we do all day long and answer questions about what the right thing to do at one stage of the company versus the next, what you're going to do in this world at 10 million versus a billion, obviously a very different set of practices. I can talk about that all day long, but my favorite thing to talk about on this topic is customer success as a value. Because if there's one thing that remains true in successful companies in today's day and age, it is that customer success is meaningful, it's real, and it's at the forefront of everything they do. And I can confidently say that was the case at Salesforce, and it's absolutely the case at Okta. So, the world has changed. Right? We all know this. Organizations have more information about us than they ever have before. And with that information, sometimes it's terrifying, but with that information, they can provide these highly curated, highly customizable experiences that really know who you are as a consumer and can compel you to do things in a way that maybe you weren't or that you didn't before. And you take that information that they have about you and their ability to provide these experiences, and then you layer on top of that adoption of cloud, adoption of mobile, and then literally the millions of apps you have out there to kind of do your life. You have more choice. You have more choice than you ever had before as a consumer. And as a consumer, we're starting to see that we're bringing those expectations into the workplace with us. So me at Okta, or in my past, I've been a buyer of technology, right? I'm buying technologies for my team to use. I'm buying technologies for our customers to use. And I have expectations about how those things are going to go. And this combination of information, cloud, apps, choice is creating this dynamic where we're truly bringing that into the workplace with us. And we looked at a couple of studies on this. 65% of buyers find that a positive experience with their brand is more influential than great advertising. So positive experience with the brand. And what does that mean? That can mean a lot of things. It can mean the way that you're interacting with individuals at that company. It can mean how the technology is working, which is kind of table stakes today. And then it can mean what that brand stands for. And this one's kind of funny, but the Walker study was done in 2013. So 7 years ago, almost 7 years ago. Here we are 4 months prior to 2020, and it turns out they were right. Customer experience will overtake price and product as the key brand differentiators. So Walker survey said it, but what are we actually seeing? Like I said, I've spent my career in this world and talking about this with buyers and customers. And when I started at Okta about 5.5 years ago, one of my first initiatives, one of the things that I did was to get our sales team talking about customer success. Getting them talking about customer success is a key differentiator in the sales cycle to help customers understand why Okta was different, why we were going to be different than any other identity provider, but why we were also going to be different and why the experience with us was different than anything that they had experienced with a technology provider in the past, and that our partnership was going to be greater. And that was kind of hard, right? Historically, sales teams, they haven't always wanted to bring this information into the sales cycle because it was going to be professional services heavy, or we didn't really have a great plan for how we were going to deal with them and what it was we were going to do in the past. But what our sales team quickly recognized was that by doing this, it did differentiate us. And so going back to this study, that was 5.5 years ago, what's happened now is we're seeing this behavior more and more frequently where customers are asking us, and sometimes even before we get to it in the sales cycle. And the question they're asking is, okay, so tell me about customer success. Tell me about how you're going to partner with me post-sales. Tell me about how you're going to make me successful, not only the first time, but as you continue to iterate and release new technology every month. How am I going to know about that? How am I going to get value out of that? So the world has kind of changed, right? All this data that we have up here, we're seeing it in reality. So nailing that experience and nailing that experience with your brand is absolutely critical to winning and keeping that business. And customer success is your key to get there. So to kind of bring it home a little bit, if you think about how does this show up in your personal life, 3 examples that work well for me are banking. I, up until a couple years ago, had the same bank I'd had since I was 16 years old. Bank works, I trust them, there's nothing wrong with their brand, but their technology. As I started to move and do more and more of my life on my device, I couldn't do the things that I needed to do to bank. I couldn't, and I know this might age me a little bit, but I couldn't order checks in my app. I live in Idaho, and I still have to pay a lot of people with checks. So I couldn't order that. I had to call and wait on hold or go through some crazy bunch of links and log in 18 times. Maybe they needed Okta, but log in 18 times to get my checks. So that was annoying. But even more annoying is I travel. I travel pretty much every week. I could be everywhere, anywhere in the US or really anywhere in the world. And remember how you have to call, oh yeah, I'm going to be here. They're going to cut off your debit card or your credit card or whatever it is. A little plug for American Express. They're much better at it than anyone else. That aside, I didn't want to wait on hold. So I would call the lady and say, yeah, I'm going to be here and here and here. And she'd say, well, you're going to have to call us next week. I'm like, I'm not going to call you. Crazy? I'm not going to call you next week. Okay, well, I'll give you like a month, and then you're going to have to call us next month. So this is not working for me. And so I found an app. I found another bank that had the app that allowed me to order my checks. It allowed me to update my travel preferences, and it allowed me to do wire transfers, which is something that I used to have to go into my bank for. Now that bank allows you to do it online, but not in the app. So that's like an example of choices, right? Choices. And the technology, the table stakes pieces has allowed me or made me change a really long-standing relationship that I had with a brand. And when you think about companies like Uber, or you think about your shopping experience with organizations like Trunk Club, Uber's a great example of where it works, the app is slick, the interactions that you have with drivers are usually, unless you're in a really stinky car, but usually good. But what they stood for a year and a half ago, we all remember the Delete Uber campaign, and what they stood for had a big impact on their customer base, and it created change in customer base because of some things that were going on in their organization. And then certainly shopping, right? We don't shop every day, but when we do, this idea of not only online shopping and making it easy, but creating a really customized experience. So you all know, when you go online and based on what you're talking about or what you've shopped for in the past, they're going to serve you up with options. But what's unique about companies like Trunk Club, who's also an Okta customer, I should note, is that they give you a person. So you fill out your preferences, and here are the climates I live in, and this is my work attire and my personal attire, and I try whatever it is. And they get an idea of who you are and what it is you want. But then you have a person, and your quality and your experience with that brand really comes down to how well that person can get to know you and your preferences. Because they reach out to you 4 to 6 times a year and say, hey, do you have a special event coming up? Summer's coming up, what do you need? And their ability to understand you, your life, based on that information that they have is the success of that company is completely dependent on that. So there's really three pieces to it, right? There's the technology piece. Does your technology work? Can people do what it is they want to do with it? There is your brand. Does your brand stand for something that's a little bit broader or beyond you? Are you all about diversity and inclusion? Do you have a nonprofit arm who's really about making the world a better place? The people. Are you interacting with the people? How are those things going? So those three pieces really make up a brand, and that is the expectation that people bring to work every day. They bring that expectation of this experience they have as a consumer into the office. And it's becoming a critical part of decision making. So you've got the information, you've got the rise of cloud, you've got the rise of mobile. People have choices, and they can make those choices every year, all of the time. And again, that relationship and experience determine that choice. They want to see innovation. They want to see regular updates. They want feedback. They want to share feedback. They want to partner with you. And investing in customer success is the way to really make this thing real. And if relationship and all the stuff that we've talked about isn't enough to really convince you why customer success is important, the economics speak for themselves. So if you read this slide up here, pretty compelling number. Billion-dollar company, so not valuation, just a billion-dollar company. You're doing $1 billion in business every year. If you invest in the customer experience within 3 years, you will double your size. Like, who doesn't want to do that? I mean, that's a good thing, right? Who doesn't want that? And if customer experience is your way to get there, well, then it becomes something that you can't even argue about anymore. The other thing is that as a SaaS organization, you will hit a point in time in your growth. If you're a successful company, you will hit a point in time in your growth where your renewable revenue every quarter, every year, will actually exceed the amount of new business you need to bring in the door. So when you hit that period of time, you have to have already been prepared for it. You have to have already staffed up. You have to have already been treating your customers in this way where they trust your brand, they trust the partnership, they trust the technology. And if you don't, you're going to be behind. Right? You will not have a company that will continue to grow and that will be future-proof. So I've led customer success teams my whole life, like I said. I've learned a lot about it, and I'm proud of the work that I do. So I've learned a lot about some of the things you need to think about in terms of how to make this real at your organization. And the number one thing that is central to really making customer success real at your organization is customer success as a value. If you do not have that as a value all the way at the top of your organization to the very bottom, you're going to struggle in this area. And I'll tell you a little bit what I mean, or how do we make it a core value. So the first thing in this is CEO sponsorship is a must. Okta was founded about 10 years ago, and I joined about 5.5 years ago. And one of the reasons I joined was because Okta was making customer success a real thing in a very tangible and different way than I had seen at other companies or that I'd even experienced myself. And we talked about it all the time. It was on our CEO's agenda every time. How's this customer doing? What are they thinking? What's their experience with us? And how that became real, I'll give you a couple examples, but every technology company, when they're growing, they're gonna run into something. Like the technology that you build when you're a $10 million company or zero, and the technology that you need to support a $1 billion user base, those things just usually don't scale without some bumps in the road. And when those things would happen, whether or not they were quote unquote Okta's fault, our CEO set the tone every single time. It doesn't matter. It's our customer. Doesn't matter if the issue is on our platform or someone else's, it is our customer, and we own their success with our product and their interactions. So we will bring in the other partners, we will fix it. So having the sponsorship at that level is really critical, because when those things happen, you can have the best engineering or best product team in the world, but they'll say, hey, it's not our technology. Like, we built this bulletproof stuff, it's not ours. And your CEO will say, actually, it doesn't matter. It is. Or when truly it is a problem with your technology, how you respond as an organization is really driven by how you think about customer success at the top of the organization. So one quick note here, I do a lot of advising with startups and companies who are thinking about this. And the question they always ask me, or the question I always get asked is, where should this report? And they say, I think I should report into sales. And my answer is absolutely categorically not. This thing should not report into sales. You need to have, and particularly, well, should not report into sales. It should report into the CEO and not just the CSM leader. When I talk about customer success, I'm talking about everything post-sales. You have to unite that experience in order to really create an experience for customers where they're not sort of experiencing drop-off of information or handoffs, issues with handoffs, that kind of thing. But that whole function needs to report into the CEO, and it should not report into sales, and here's why. You are all, most of you, from what I read of the attendee list, are majority from high-growth organizations. High-growth organizations are all about capturing market share. You're going to do everything that you can to capture market share, to get that next big customer, to go up market, go broader, whatever it is that's part of your strategy. And when you have this post-sales function, reporting into that in a high-growth situation, that person, when it comes down to the dollars, unless they're really, really good, and there are a few of them, it's not to say that they don't exist, because there are a few sales leaders who can prioritize this way, they're going to put their money towards pipe gen. They're going to put their money towards AEs, SEs, and when they hit that point of, oh, wow, the amount of money that I have to renew every quarter or every year is exceeding the amount that I need to bring in, and I'm not prepared, that's a problem. It's a big problem in your evolution of a company. So the reporting piece is very important, where you put them in and who you put them in on par, who they're on par with in the organization, because that sends a message, right? It sends a message to the rest of the organization that says, yeah, this is absolutely critical to our success, so critical that it's a C-level function, it reports into the CEO. So next, thinking of your customers as partners and treating them as such. Expectations of how we interact with customers are so different than they were in the past. And the expectation truly is collaboration.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
So you mentioned CEO sponsorship. Would you rate a customer success executive in the same level or on par with like the CTO or the CIO in terms of the importance to the organization?
Yes, it depends on the scope of the role. So if you think about you usually have education, professional services, CSMs, renewals, support, or something like that, some sort of soup with those things in it. I don't think it makes sense to have each one of those reporting to the CEO, but to have a leader of all of those things who's overseeing the post-sales customer experience, and that person reporting into the C-suite, yes. Does that make sense?
It does. So the reason full disclosure, I'm not a salesperson. I'm coming from the tech side.
Mm-hmm.
But I've worked in a number of startups in leadership positions, and this area was always lacking, and that's why the startups didn't do well.
Yeah.
I think a strong sales pipeline really makes a difference. I'm not a salesman, but I recognize the value. So this is good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions on that topic? No? Okay, so the next one is treating your customers as true partners. So it's a two-way street. It's not a one-time discussion. It's not a one-time solution. In SaaS, if you're a good company, you delivered that first solution that the customer was after, but you're constantly iterating. You're releasing monthly, weekly, quarterly, sometimes 3 times a year at a minimum. Well, sometimes 2 times a year as a minimum, but you're constantly delivering innovation to your customers, and you need to have that established relationship with the customer where they're open to hearing about what else it is that you've done. And you might think like, well, that seems sort of obvious, but people are busy. And your technology is just one technology in their stack, and their spend will determine how much time they're going to spend with you. So establishing that relationship really early on that says, hey, I'm not just going to help you get successful to start with, but I'm going to continue to tell you about all the things that we are delivering that we think are going to solve this problem that you have, or that will deliver more value to your organization. Or we're going to talk to you about things that you're not even thinking about. So a couple years ago, this concept of zero trust started to emerge. And at Okta, we started to talk to our customers about zero trust and how identity was the new perimeter. And that now it's a normal conversation, but then it was a very new conversation. And our CIOs and our CISOs, they started to look at Okta in a different light and saying, wow, your partnership with me is different. You were telling me to think about things that I'm not even thinking about. and to consider the future in a way that I've never considered it before. So this relationship and getting to that kind of partnership with a customer is absolutely critical to customer success. The next one is the customer isn't always right. You know, if you've ever had a retail job, you've heard about this one. Oh, the customer's always right, blah, blah, blah. And in technology, they aren't. I think it depends on where you are in your stage of growth and where you are in what I call getting a seat at the big kids table. And in the early days, you're just trying to capture market share. You're just trying to get your name out there. You're trying to make sure people understand what you do and what problems you solve. And in the process of that, you're going to do some special things for customers. I remember when I first joined Okta, a couple weeks in, they told us about, we were talking about this customer, Allergan. Allergan was our biggest customer at the time. We'd partnered with them still a customer, by the way, very successful customer. We'd partnered with them for a year and a half, and relative to my experience at Salesforce, $1 billion company, we were doing some crazy stuff for Allergan that I was like, this is never going to scale. Why are we doing this? But I didn't have an appreciation at that point in time of exactly where Okta was in terms of capturing market share and where we were in the growth. And the conversation was, okay, yeah, we're doing the right thing now, but what this customer is asking us to do, if we're having the same conversation and doing the same thing in 3 years, our product innovation is going to come to a halt. And we need to think about how we interact with customers in our development and our product life cycles in a way that's scalable and applicable to multi-customers. So telling them and continuing to respond in the way that we responded to Allergan in the early days would not have been a recipe for long-term success or growth of our company. Another example of that is, it's one that's top of mind for me right now, is we have a very large organization, customer we've got a great relationship with. They're very happy with our technology, but they can't seem to get moving. And they're paying for some professional services, and their exec sponsor came to me and said, hey, I think I need you to give me that project manager full-time. I don't want him quarter-time, I want him full-time because I need him to help me move things along. And I said, well, I appreciate that you trust us. I appreciate that you want to spend money with us, but that's not the answer to your problem. The answer to your problem is your team is getting conflicting direction from you, which is also kind of an awkward conversation to have, but they're getting conflicting direction from you, and here's what I need you to do. Once you do that, then yeah, let's talk about spending some more money and getting more robust project management. Can't have that conversation if you didn't do that first bullet or that second bullet around establishing that partnership. And then last, product and engineering, our relationships are critical to customer success. A lot of people, when they see this, they say, oh, well, what about sales? And my response on that is, yes, that is absolutely critical, but that sorts itself out. Like, there's money involved, you know? And where there's friction in those sales deals, it's usually larger deals that are new for your organization. So you're gonna figure it out where there's money involved. Where it's a little different is when things go wrong. And many organizations are measured by how they react when things go wrong. And your ability as an organization, as a customer success, or at Okta we call it customer first, because we always put the customer first. Your ability to respond to those situations when things go wrong with the technology or when things go wrong with messaging, or there's a million things that can happen, but those are dependent upon your relationships with product and engineering. And if you don't have those established relationships where you trust each other, you work well together, you know that what is coming out of the other person's mouth on both sides of that conversation is absolutely true and accurate, you're not going to be able to respond in those crisis moments in the way that you need to, in the way that will differentiate you from your competition. So product and engineering relationships are absolutely critical. It's a lot of work to nail these 4 bullets. None of these things happen in a quarter or even a year. They're multi-year projects that you'll continue to revisit, each one with varying degrees depending on the dynamics in your organization. But let's say you've done this. Let's say you're that unicorn who has nailed all 4 of these things in 1 quarter, and you're ready to talk about the next step and how you make it real. So the next step is you need to have a common vernacular and playbook. You need to, at your organization, have a way that everyone talks about customer success with customers, with press, with partners, with analysts, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be rocket science. This is what we use at Okta. I'm sure it is not the best out there. I'm sure we need to revisit it. But this gives us common language across the company that we use to talk to anyone in our ecosystem about how we think about customer success at Okta. So that when we talk to a prospect, we're using the same words that we're using when we talk with a longtime customer or an analyst or someone in the press. And so that goes a long way, consistency and integrity, and really sends the message that, yeah, we not only have we invested in the function, but we've invested in everyone understanding it and making it understandable for you, anyone who's in our ecosystem. This will change, right? This will change as your company changes and as you grow. So it's not a set it and forget it. It's definitely something that you need to revisit. 2-3 years ago at Okta, when we talked about Learn, which is all about understanding the problems that our technology solves, we just talked about it from an education perspective. Now we talk about it from a sales engineering perspective, an education perspective, and professional services. When we used to talk about Deploy, we talked about it from an Okta professional services perspective. Well, now, 3 years later, the partner ecosystem surrounding us is so much greater that when we talk about Deploy, we talk about partners in that Deploy piece. So it will change. My point is be flexible. Know that it's not set it and forget it. It will change. And when you have a structure like this that is well adopted across the organization, you will be successful. You will send a message to your customers, and you will become a company that's known for your customer experience. So key takeaways. We talked about quite a few things today. Information and cloud and mobile consumers expect very personalized, very flexible experiences that map where they are and what they want to do. Creates a better overall experience. And it makes it very easy for us as an enterprise, us as enterprises, to say, hey, this is what they expect in their consumer life, and let's replicate that in the enterprise. And we know that when we do that, we will have more success. We know that if we nail all of these things, that your company will grow and that you will experience massive success like companies like Salesforce and Okta have. So I hope my time with you today has really nailed that message. And if you have any questions, I'm certainly available for them. Thank you.